Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Otolaryngologic Clinics Podcast series. I'm Stacy Eastman, the managing editor for the series here at Elsevier. Otolaryngologic Clinics is a bi-monthly publication consisting of review articles focused on a central topic. Today, we will be discussing the October 2024 issue dedicated to artificial intelligence in otolaryngology. Guest edited by Drs. Anaïs Rameau and Matthew Crowson. Here now is Consulting Editor Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar to lead the discussion.
Hello, I'm Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm the Consulting Editor of Otolaryngologic Clinics of North America, and today I'm speaking with Drs. Anaïs Rameau and Matthew Crowson, guest editors of the October 2024 issue of Clinics, which is on artificial intelligence in otolaryngology. Dr. Rameau, whose initials after her name are MDCM, MD, MS, MSc, MPhil, FACS, is Associate Professor in the Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, and in the Sean Parker Institute for the Voice at Weill Cornell Medical College in New York, in the United States. Dr. Crowson, whose initials after his name are MD, MPA, MASc, MBI, and FRCRC, is Assistant Professor in the Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Hospital at Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts, also in the United States. So, Anaïs and Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. So great to be here.
I'm so happy to talk to you about this, and I was so happy when we were putting the issue together and brainstorming a bit, and really I felt that every part of this was a very interesting learning process for me. In fact, when the three of us were talking about getting this issue, I went ahead and took a couple of Coursera courses at various institutions so that I would have a little bit of background in AI so that I could actually read the issue a little bit more intelligently than at onset. So your issue tackles a new and often scary for us clinicians and always quickly evolving subject, which is artificial intelligence. And it talks about how AI interfaces with a medical surgical field such as ours. There are 16 articles that cover subjects in detail, including computer vision, videomics, radiomics, pathognomics, generative AI, AI and acoustic data, which actually affects not just otology but also laryngology, and autonomous robotic systems. Listeners, if, like me, you understood very little of what I just said, in the article by Bourdillon, there are some really nice figures that explain in detail radiomics and pathognomics. In the article by Sriram, Creighton, and Galaya, there is a very nice illustration of levels of autonomy in robotic surgery from 0, where the human surgeon has full control, and the robot is kind of a dumb tool, which is where I think most robotic surgeries are now, to level 5, where the robot completes the surgery from start to finish, and there's no human surgeon oversight, which really frightens me, having watched enough science fiction movies in my life. So, Anaïs and Matt, you've also included several articles focused on AI and each of the major subspecialties in otolaryngology. In their article, Wang and Valdez include a sort of meta table of the output. The chatbot of ChatGPT was queried about the applications of AI in pediatric ENT. And then you have 5 more articles that address governance and implementation in a really thoughtful way. I strongly encourage our listeners to get this issue either online at www.oto.theclinics.com or in your personal or institutional library, as this gives a very accessible deep dive into the future that is unfolding right now. So for the purposes of this podcast, Drs. Rameau and Crowson and I will discuss some big concepts and controversies in artificial intelligence and otolaryngology. So, Dr. Rameau, In the foreword, you mentioned that AI should be conceived as an augmentative tool for the otolaryngologist and not as a replacement. However, a recent study in JAMA, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association, demonstrated that AI alone is better than physicians alone and AI-aided physicians in diagnosis. So does that change your assessment?
Yeah, so that was an interesting and recent finding that I think got a lot of press and visibility. I think in general, the way people have been thinking about AI within the context of healthcare has been to think of it as an augmentative technology where the human clinician would now have a tool that would allow them to be in touch with, novel findings in the literature, guidelines, and really making sure that we clinicians function at or optimal performance. So, and going back in the literature, it was really nice to see this early paper from Dr. Shabshe back in 2014 that actually envisioned AI as a way for us to be augmented as clinicians. So this recent study that came out in the JAMA network that was led by scientists at Stanford along with other institutions, the primary author is Dr. Go and last author is Dr. Chen, came as a little bit of a surprise. There are limitations with that study, which I'll briefly review, but the findings of that research was that AI alone, or a large language model, in this case, ChatGPT-4, performed better than clinicians alone, but also clinicians augmented by ChatGPT. So a little bit controversial and against our intuition. There are limitations to that study, which, really require further evaluation. One of the limitations is that vignettes were used. Those were not real clinical cases, but those are vignettes that are used to test computer systems in their ability to support clinicians in decision-making. This is not how we evaluate patients in the clinic. We don't read a text and then try to assess what the diagnosis is. In a way, the information is not multimodal. It's a text. And when we see patients in the clinic, especially in the surgical field like ENT, the visual aspects are extremely important. There's, for me as a laryngologist, I listen to the patient's voice. There's so much we get from just observing our patients. And certainly these vignettes don't really portray the reality of clinical interactions. However, this is really opening, I think, a major question for us as clinicians, scientists. It could be that moving forward, we'll be able to build AI systems that will outperform clinicians in the diagnostic tasks. And if that's the case, first of all, we need to demonstrate that across multiple prospective studies and make sure that those systems are safe and reliable. But then we will need to, review as a community if we want to value the outcomes or the humanistic aspects of medicine and how we really think about the patient-doctor relationship with these new agents, in the room. That will require more study. We don't know yet if that's really the case, but really something that requires a lot of introspection and reflection as a community.
Beautiful synopsis of where we are. We think a lot about, as we get older in our field, we rely on that sort of knowledge upon knowledge upon knowledge, and the computer in our brain seems to be able to pick out patterns that I'm not seeing play out as effectively in artificial intelligence. You present something to your senior attending, and maybe we don't really know how to work our cell phones, but we can figure out what's wrong with that patient pretty fast, right? So I think that's a real interesting part of what we're experiencing. And I think when I read this issue, I thought a lot about how, in radiology and pathology, where it's a sort of a concrete set of images, how that's been fed and fed and fed into these large databases and sort of educated the AI. But like you said, Anaïs, we use so much more when we assess a patient clinically. And I think that's that's a real interesting place to go to. Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Dr. Rameau's assessment and how to break this down, because it does get a little bit complicated in terms of thinking about how this is going to be augmenting our clinical decision making. There's a great book from the University of Toronto Rotman School of Business called Prediction Machines. I highly recommend if you're interested in the economics and general, how we think about AI and augmenting human performance. They break down decision making into two components, like a math equation: prediction and judgment. So we are finding that AI is excellent at prediction. Dr. Chandrasekhar, as you mentioned, classifying X-ray images for X, Y, or Z pathology or path slides or whatever. But where humans excel is in judgment. And you need both those components to make a good decision, because, given you predict a patient is going to, perform or do well after their surgery, but how do you use that information, which is judgment, that ends up, driving your decision. And so I kind of think of AI in that sense of it's really good at prediction, so it's going to help us make better decisions. But as we all are kind of orbiting around, there's much more to decision making than just prediction. It really is that judgment piece where AI really isn't is nowhere close to the kind of the power of our human brains in doing so.
That's interesting. And is that something that people smarter than I are trying to replicate? Is that human judgment ability?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very hot area of research right now, and probably bucketed under artificial general intelligence, whereby these systems have the ability to do reasoning, which is kind of a precursor or a prerequisite to judgment. And so, who knows if GPT-5, which is coming out maybe in the next year or so, will have advanced reasoning capabilities. But that is a hot area of research where giving AI more than just prediction ability. More along the lines of reasoning and in that lane of judgment.
Yeah, any of us who saw the Terminator movies, right, the original ones with Arnold Schwarzenegger, when the Terminator robot realizes that he should not kill or hurt people because the boy has instructed him to figure out how to get judgment and know not to do that, was a really interesting way that, decades ago, the movie industry kind of introduced this idea for us. So, given all this hype around AI and healthcare and other industries, Matt, why haven't we seen widespread adoption in our healthcare systems or in our field?
Yeah, this is also an area of massive interest and debate right now. I think we've seen a tremendous amount of investment in AI and generative AI, from our financial colleagues, venture capital, hedge funds, big banks, big tech, you name it. AI is tip of the tongue for everybody, but in the chaotic world that is healthcare, there are many reasons why we haven't seen widespread adoption, but principally in many cases, it's because you can't, airdrop an AI solution into a really, crummy workflow or a process or a broken process. Expect everything to be hunky-dory and fixed. And so, one example is, people feel like, AI for radiology or radiomics is a solved problem, right? We're moving past computer vision now and doing more fancy things. But, if we have problems where we don't have the human and technology resources to get our patients through MRIs on time, at least, to the level that we want to offer that service in a timely way, if we're speeding up the interpretation of the images, well, we don't have radiologists to read them. We don't have technicians necessarily to be doing more MRI. And so we're not going to move the needle on outcomes necessarily because of other processes that are external to the prediction task of, said algorithm that's supposedly supposed to be helping us move the ball down the court. So that's one reason, is because, we can't just expect AI to make everything imperfect into perfect in of itself. And then, which is also touched on in the paper by a couple of our authors, is that there's also sorts of ethical and other kind of larger macro and meta issues on how AI can or should not be making decisions at point of care. So multifaceted reasons, I would say, in some as to why we're not seeing widespread adoption.
Yeah, I think you alluded to the article by Chen and Lobo, which really highlights the FDA guidelines and regulations that, you can use as a barrier, you can view as a barrier to implementation, but you can view as ensuring that the center of the any model we build is the patient and excellent patient care, right? And I think this is really important because it's sort of like come with me if you want to live, right? It's sort of like a Terminator thing where once there's more judgment, better judgment, keeping the patient in the center, maybe keeping us in the center. If AI is really going to help us, work more efficiently and maybe have more fun with our friends or our family at the end of the day. So I think that's it's a very interesting article because it takes what we currently understand quite well about FDA drug development and shows it in AI development and sort of these much less tangible place that's being developed. So Anaïs, as with everything that's new, there are so many words and new meanings of words that we have to learn when we talk about this subject. So what is epistemology and why are ethics and epistemology challenges intertwined in health artificial intelligence?
Sure. So this is a topic that's very close to my heart because I actually have a background in philosophy and I'm particularly interested in philosophy of science. And a lot of philosophy of science is interested with what is the basis of knowledge in the different sciences. And that whole field that's focused on understanding the nature of knowledge as opposed to beliefs is called epistemology. Now, in medicine, knowledge is very powerful. Now, knowledge is actually what leads us to make decisions about very invasive interventions, such as surgery. So, knowledge is really a trigger for important decision-making. And with any decision, we have to weigh the risks and benefits, and we have to think about the values of our patients, of our healthcare systems. So any clinical decision relies on ethical principles. So really thinking about knowledge in medicine is closely intertwined with concepts of ethics. Now I never thought actually going into medicine that my background in philosophy of science would come handy, but for me, it really helps me think about AI in our current context because, those are very advanced knowledge systems that are transforming the way we're treating our patients. So there are multiple levels where epistemology or the science of knowledge and ethics are coming together in this new era of AI and healthcare and otolaryngology. One of them is, essentially all these AI systems are black boxes, meaning that we don't completely understand how they function. They're extremely complex. The way they're linking input and output data in nonlinear fashion is beyond, what we can really conceive as humans, just because that's just not the way we think. And so the problem with that is that, when we're making important decisions for our patients, such as whether they need to go to the operating room, it is a little daunting that you'd be relying on a tool that potentially you don't fully understand, because how do you then approach your patient with a consent form and tell them, I don't fully understand this tool. It's been well studied, but it says that you should go to the operating room. So I think that that's a profound change in the way we're really approaching clinical decision making. So that's one aspect. The other thing is that people have been looking at trust issues, both among patients and among clinicians. And it is true that, beyond informed consent, if you don't really understand, if you can't really explain how something works, it might be difficult to fully trust it. We actually looked at that in a psychological experiment where we exposed clinicians to stroboscopies and then looked at how they handled information that was provided by a fictitious AI. And we found that clinicians were much more likely to trust the AI and change their judgment when a specific explanation was provided for why the AI was providing that recommendation. We also found that people who were less confident in their decision making were more likely to rely on AI. So that's problematic. So that's another area that's problematic in terms of epistemology and ethics. There are ways to overcome this by, for instance, having ad hoc analysis. So, for instance, having heat maps that can highlight the area that the AI is paying attention to on an image and what's leading to its decision making. But certainly, that's another area that needs to be further fleshed out from a technical standpoint, but also from an ethical standpoint. Other issues are around reproducibility and replicability. Matt talked about it. A lot of the research right now in AI is really at the pilot level. The other problem is that people are not always sharing their data, not always sharing their codes. It's actually been found that a very large portion of the AI literature in healthcare is not reproducible, which means that you use the same data and the same methods and you don't get to the same result. And that's very problematic. Thankfully, we're seeing changes. We see that some journals are really requiring that you provide your data, that you provide your code. So hopefully that will help overcome some of these issues around reproducibility. And then finally, a better known problem that's at the junction of AI and epistemology and ethics is really the risk of bias. So I think a lot of us know about this. We know that AI will not necessarily function well for all populations. And so that's a problem, especially in our current governance and legal system, because the onus right now is on the HIPAA entity to take responsibility for the output of the AI. And if the AI doesn't work well for all populations and one population is hurt by that, then we as physicians are actually responsible. So that's a big problem. And certainly, I don't think a lot of people know that, but that may also slow down the adoption of AI. Another issue that I see with AI and bias is that a lot of the AI nowadays relies on these very large transformer systems that belong to technology companies, and that may have certain stances on the world, certain value systems. So that sort of algorithmic lack of pluralism is gonna really potentially impact the decision makings that are made in a way that's not really always corresponding to our patient's value system. So that's a problem, and we really need to foster algorithmic pluralism, and the best way to do that is to have our patients or stakeholders, a diversity of clinicians involved in creating this AI to make sure it represents the different values of our societies.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. Thank you. Lots of surgical teams include an ethicist when they make rounds, right? As a matter of course. Is there such an inclusion of somebody who can really understand sort of legal and moral and healthcare ethics when these systems are being developed? Is that something that's happening?
I have friends in philosophy, so I know a little bit about this. And I can say that my friends in philosophy of science right now are very excited because there are many jobs. So it's a good time to, be thinking about these issues, because clearly it's a huge change in viewpoint in our societies, in the way we're thinking about things. And there are some really smart people in this field. We should get them more involved. And I see them a lot in universities, but not so much in hospitals. Or ethicists have a growing interest, but they're not always, able to help in specific clinical decision yet. So, but certainly that's a great idea. Having them more involved at this juncture would be a good action item.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about nuts and bolts. So Dr. Crowson, how can folks get started with AI in their practices or in their research efforts? Like, what's sort of like the AI 101, 102 kind of entry-level foray?
I think we're really going to see more blossoming enthusiasm for using AI for everything, maybe even slicing our bread soon, who knows? But in terms of getting started, I think us being in this field, medical education is always a great start. There are so many free resources online right now through companies like LinkedIn, Coursera, Udacity, choose your favorite online kind of open source education vendor, where you can get a very high quality AI 101 education quite quickly to really understand like what is this all about, what are the opportunities, what are the limitations, and some of these are actually designed with healthcare providers in mind as well. So education is step one, and then say that tickles the appetite, and you really want to start thinking about solutioning. We have seen this massive democratization of models, software suites, such that you don't need to be a Python or an R coder anymore to be able to even build your own solutions. There are kind of point and click platforms out there that use the latest and greatest, large language models from Microsoft or Amazon or Meta, NVIDIA, and you can, create your own custom chatbot for your practice that will, theoretically handle administrative monotony, or even some point in the future, in the near future, probably, be that first point of contact for your patients in some aspects. And so all of this, we are rapidly speeding towards this being the low barrier to entry from a technical perspective in order to really kind of realize the benefits of automation in this context. And so part of this, to get a little bit academic, how we're at this point is that we have seen, massive explosion technological capability in the past, 10 years related to the interest in deep learning, which is a subfield of artificial intelligence, whereby, that smartphone that you have in your pocket right now is a billion times faster than some of the computers that NASA was using in the 60s to put spaceships up into Earth's orbit, even to the moon. And so we have this these little supercomputers available everywhere, which can munge all the data we have at our disposal. Also run these compute heavy and compute hungry algorithms that are being developed by our high tech partners. And so all that's to say, there is so much free available resources out there. If you're interested in kind of learning a bit more how to implement these sort of technology in your practice, that is a very low barrier to entry now.
Yeah, and I will say that the courses that you talked about, just, it's very nice. It takes away some of the fear of what is this field going to be like, because if I'm going to say to my patient, now it's 2027 and we're using AI to predict outcomes and to kind of help us navigate your clinical path, I need to, as Anaïs said, I need to be able to explain in a way that maintains that patient's trust in me and the system, that there's nothing nefarious going on, that everything that's going on is for their best outcomes, right? And I think that's, if we don't know it, somebody very famous, maybe it was Einstein, maybe it was somebody else, said that if you can explain something to me like you'd explain to your grandmother, and hopefully your grandmother is not a nuclear physicist, a normal person, in a way that they can understand it, then you really understand it. Both of you have said that, and I applaud both of you for saying that.
I just want to take a quick pause here to let our listeners know that they can receive an exclusive discount on the issue we are discussing today by visiting us.elsevierhealth.com/expert.
Anaïs, you're a laryngologist. I'm an otologist. We're really small subspecialists in otolaryngology, and then even much more so in medicine writ large. Is there a value in developing AI and AI systems for a small subspecialty like ours versus more general fields that maybe touch more people on a given day?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's actually a nice piece by Tony Law that addresses both subspecialties and the role of acoustics and AI. So, yeah, absolutely. So I think this is a time for small subspecialties like ours to shine, because we have very unique data sets. And these unique data sets are actually very important for communication technologies. We need hearing and we need voice to communicate with, or iPhones and various new technologies that are voice-based. We need to also be able to hear. So certainly this is a very special time, I think, for both laryngology and otology. Obviously, there was the recent hearing test and earphones from Apple as an example of that. In laryngology, we've been the only specialty within medicine that's been collecting voices. And voice now is a very unique data set. First of all, it's digital data. A lot of technologies are relying on voice and speech. It has a unique signature to each of us. It is also a protected data type according to HIPAA, so it has a special status. But it also connects us beyond, the typical laryngological diseases that we encounter, from vocal fold paralysis to laryngopharyngeal reflux, to the greater world of medicine, because we have known that people with Parkinson's disease have changes to their voice that are quite predictable. And you will take some expert laryngologists, they might be able even to suspect that based on the patient's voice. But now with AI, we have the capability of creating these systems that can democratize that expertise beyond the confines of our laryngology clinic. So this is a very unique time where, there's a potential for, or very, very small subspecialties within medicine to have a huge impact for patients who are not even being seen that regularly within our clinics. So this is very exciting. I think we have a special role. Otolaryngologists are always early adopters of technology, and I definitely think that a lot of the folks I'm talking to, especially who are in training, have a huge interest in the potential. So I'm very optimistic in what we'll be able to accomplish in greater medicine.
So I think in that same way, do you think that all of the data that we have on audiograms, pre and post intervention, serve the same purpose as big data sets that we can then say, well, your chances of improvement after a partial ossicular reconstruction prosthesis, looking at, 10 million cases across the world, is this? Is that something that you think we'll be using in the future?
Absolutely. I'll maybe defer to Matt, because this is really his subspecialty as well and his expertise. I'm sure he has a lot of thoughts about that.
Yeah, in fact, as another shameless plug, but for some research we did previously on predicting postoperative cochlear implant performance using ML. I think it's going to be very helpful across a couple of domains. One, enabling our patients to proceed more confidently with their surgical decision, with confidence that more confidence than just us telling them that we are in our hands. Our performance is 90%. With some objective data to back up what the patient can expect postoperatively from whatever intervention we are doing. I think that really helps with shared decision making. I come from Canada, and we have a different healthcare system, and whereby we have a capitated healthcare system where sometimes we have to make decisions on expensive technologies and prioritize based off of guidelines and best practices. But also there could be a world too, especially in a value-based care system, perhaps here in the United States, where recommending that $30,000 CI, which is basically, I tell my patients, like installing a Honda Civic in your ear. Value-wise, the model is going to say, post-op performance not looking great. Do we think about resource allocation and value, at the individual level, given that prediction that these models sometimes can give us? And so I think, we're not there yet, obviously, but I think it really opens up some interesting avenues on value and us making, more informed decisions in a sustainable way, potentially. All sorts of interesting ways this could go.
The New York Otological Society, we meet 4 times a year, and we have the January meeting. There was so much discussion about something that somebody from the outside, like our patients, might think is a known decision, right? Somebody with Meniere's disease and disabling vertigo and a cochlear implant, and do you do a labyrinthectomy, and when do you offer this, and what do you save that tissue for in the future? And I think this is where the predictive nature of AI would be very, very helpful, exactly as you said, in the shared decision-making arena of our interaction with our patients and their families. And our group, the audiologists we work with, the speech-language pathologists we work with, the anatomic pathologists, cytologists that our colleagues work with, the radiologists, right? So if we can all have access to that same pool of data that's filtered correctly so it matches the person in front of us the best, I think that would be sort of this dream state. So that's my dream. And Matthew, I'm going to ask you, Matt, what is your prediction for what this conversation, if I'm lucky enough to have it with you guys in 3 or 5 years, what will this conversation sound like as to the current nature of AI in otolaryngology and in healthcare in 3 to 5 years?
I mean, I think ultimately zooming out to our healthcare system here in the United States, I mean, it's unsustainable at the current pace and rate. And I think one of the practical use cases for AI in general for healthcare is to reduce, the error bars and variation and an error really on everyday, daily, point of care decisions. And I think, magnify that times, the thousands and potentially millions of decisions made for patients in the U.S., every day or every week. It would be my hope and my dream that principally we are realizing the dream of value-based care and, the right patient, the right time, the right therapy, at the right cost, so to speak. And so for me, I think my dream is that AI will be the catalyst for us achieving, value-based care.
We've heard a lot about writers and other creative people being quite taken aback by the use of artificial intelligence to write, let's say, the first of a script, or to write even poetry, right? And the concept is that the AI piece is taking away the good stuff, leaving us time to do some dreck, doing some unnecessary, charting or something. So where, Anaïs, will we love AI in terms of workflow, in terms of scalable impacts of, I love to work. The three of us on this podcast love to work. We love what we do, but we have a life, and it's very nice to finish work and go home and maybe spend some time, with others. Where is it that it's going to make our lives easier?
Well, so right now the hope is that there's going to be less than pajama time and that we will have less charting to do after hours. Certainly, I think that's a very reasonable expectation given, the very excellent technology that's already out there. I think that clinical reasoning is what gives us joy. So I would not want us to defer that very important part of what we do daily to the technology. I think that if you remove that piece, I'm not sure that any of us here on this call would want to be involved with medicine anymore. So, we need to keep the joy within our work, but it would be nice if AI really focused on the tasks that take us time and are unpleasant and tiring. So I think that if we can really make sure that that's where industry is heading rather than trying to replace us, that would be really wonderful. I think that for me, AI is also a source of joy because it is a source of creativity. It's a new tool that has a lot of potential. I think Matt and I have really enjoyed doing research in this space and getting some of our trainees involved and seeing them also excited about the potential. So I think there is room for creativity also around AI. And I think that for me makes me excited and, enhances my day-to-day, helps me also talk to non-clinicians about my experience with AI, because that connects a lot of people nowadays beyond medicine. And I think it's also a source of potential entrepreneurship. And I see a lot of our trainees and also a lot of current attendings who are very interested in entrepreneurship. And that's also exciting. And that's also a way for us to find joy beyond, the regular clinical framework. So I think that's also exciting. And yes, it will hopefully make us more efficient and hopefully it won't remove the joy from work. But at least for now, there's a lot of potential for us to enjoy this new tool and hopefully, and be optimistic about how it can improve not only our clinical workflows, but also our patients' outcomes, reduce costs. Those are all, potential goals that we all strive towards.
Very nice. Any final thoughts on your part, Dr. Crowson?
The wheels are in motion right now. At your health system, you may be hearing things about ambient dictation pilots or in-basket triage algorithms that will help, with us automate this administrative monotony that takes us away from the more intellectually stimulating things like patient care and operating and things like that too. So yes, these things are rolling out. I'm quite excited about how we're going to get back to, or hopefully back to, being face to face with our patients more. And I think the future is quite bright.
Well, thank you both. I'm Sujana Chandrasekhar. I'm the Consulting Editor of Otolaryngologic Clinics of North America. And today I've had the great pleasure in speaking with Dr. Anaïs Rameau and Dr. Matthew Crowson, who are the guest editors of the October 2024 issue of Clinics, which is on artificial intelligence in otolaryngology. I hope that you as the listener got a flavor for how interesting and informative this issue is. I think there are little nuggets and pearls of wisdom throughout the articles that you've included in this issue, Matt and Anaïs, and I really, really enjoyed reading it and learning the material and really thinking about it and thinking how I, as a practicing otolaryngologist, as a mentor, as an educator, as a researcher, could incorporate some of these ideas as I envision a more interesting future of all of the aspects that, as you said, Anaïs, so beautifully bring me joy, right? The things that bring me joy, if they can be enhanced by this, are so good. Dr. Anaïs Rameau is Associate Professor in the Department of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery. She's at the Sean Parker Institute for the Voice at Weill Cornell Medical College in New York City, in the United States. And Dr. Matthew Crowson is Assistant Professor in the Department of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Hospital and Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts in the United States. I want to thank you both for putting together a beautiful issue, for doing so much interesting work in this space, and for really allowing otolaryngologists around the world to benefit from all the knowledge that you have gathered and are willing to share. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Otolaryngologic Clinics Podcast series. For an exclusive discount on the issue we discussed today, focusing on artificial intelligence in otolaryngology, visit us.elsevierhealth.com/expert. Otolaryngologic Clinics is available for individual print subscription with accompanying online access or individual online-only access, and is also available on the Elsevier electronic platforms Clinical Key and Science Direct. For more information on this series and our nearly 60 other titles spanning all medical disciplines, visit info.theclinics.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, X, and subscribe to the Otolaryngologic Clinics podcast wherever you get your podcasts.